Hi guys, welcome back to Sister SLP's to Be. Today I'm going to be talking about my second externship. It was at a hospital and it was in an acute care setting.
Okay, so first question is, what are 5 things you learned during your acute care externship?
So I learned a lot, and so I'm going to say that's the first thing I learned, that you really learn on the job at your externship. There's a lot of things that school didn't teach me about the externship until I actually got there. So when you show up, go in with, again, an open mind, because you're going to learn a lot. The second thing I learned was how important collaboration and communication is with interprofessionals. I know that was like we talked about that a lot in our classes, and I was just like, that doesn't apply to me, or, I'm not gonna be talking to doctors, but yeah, that is the situation. You talk to doctors, you talk to nurses, PTs, OTs, it's just communication all the time, and it's really important in the hospital setting. My third thing that I learned was I got proficient in modified barium swallows. I'd like to say that, because we do them all the time. So it felt like modified barium swallow boot camp. On top of that, I was also doing MBS IMP. Of course, that took me several months to finish. I started MBS IMP before the externship, and I finished it right before the end of my externship. And it actually helped, actually starting to do modifieds and then doing MBS IMP, because I'm like, okay, now I know more so what this website's talking about. I know more what I'm looking at. So that was helpful, and I do recommend taking MBS IMP if you don't have a chance to do an actual modified during your externship experience. So the fourth thing I learned is that it's very important to be flexible in the hospital setting, specifically acute care, because I can do a whole chart review on someone, learn their case history, and then show up to their room and they're getting an MRI. They're not in their room. Or PT and OT is seeing them. So then I'll say, oh, I'll have to come back later, and then go see a different patient. And yeah, your schedule is very flexible, which is nice, but nothing ever really goes as planned, especially when you show up to the patient's room and they're not there. So
cool.
And the fifth thing I learned is that I love acute care, and that's where I want to be, where I want it to be, and that was my goal.
Awesome.
To get a job in an acute care setting.
Can you tell us 2 reasons why you fell in love with it?
I fell in love with acute care because of the flexibility. I know I made it sound like pros, cons. There is pros and cons to flexibility, but I get up from my desk and I'm like, I'm gonna go see patients now. And then I could say, okay, I'm gonna document now. Okay, I'm gonna see more patients now. It's literally all up to me, and I really enjoyed that rather than having a structured schedule. But that's just my preference.
Yeah. How was it doing your externship and school at the same time? How was your workload?
So that was my last semester, and so I was taking a lot less classes, so that helped a lot. And then on top of that, in this setting, you really don't take any work home with you, because everything stays at work, documentation stays at work. And in the acute care setting, you can't really plan a session. Not really, mostly because you're doing evaluations all day, and so you learn how to do the evaluation, and that's that. You don't plan oh, what book am I going to read to the kids today, and how am I going to use it to target their sounds and stuff. So no planning really goes into it.
Yeah, speaking of sessions, was it hard for you to go from planning sessions to just walking in and doing clinical bedside swallows?
Yeah, once you get proficient in doing bedsides, doing modifieds, then it's not a scary thing, and it becomes routine, and you just do the same thing over and over again. So I kind of like that though.
Cool. Another question. So some people find hospitals kind of scary because of all the wires, and specifically in acute care, there might be death. How did you handle that, or what was your experience with that?
Yeah, So my supervisor was a CNA, so she knew a lot of everything. She knew every single tube and exam, and I had to learn so much new medical terminology. Like prior to going to acute care, I didn't even know what NPO even stood for. To be honest, I still don't know what it stands for, but I just know it means nothing by mouth. And that's a terminology that we use all the time, regularly. So like I said, you learn when you're there, so be ready for that. I went in with no hospital experience and I did fine, I think.
How was handling death?
Handling death, that's a totally different question, but
Yes.
I hear it's more it's difficult for people, and that's not something that they prepared us for in grad school. That's not something that's talked about at all, but I know my classmates really struggled. When I was in the schools and my classmates were in their hospital rotation, they talked about that being one of the hardest things, that they were not prepared for that. So I went into my hospital rotation like already knowing what they had gone through and what to anticipate. So I think I was able to handle it more because I was given that warning. It is hard, especially when it's someone that you've been working with and they pass, but it's something to be expected in this setting. So if you get your rotation in the hospital, just be prepared to have those experiences.
How was the setup at your hospital for SLPs, like your office and how you divided up work with PRNs and such?
Yeah, so at our hospital there was 2 SLPs and we just had one rehab room, and in that room we shared it with PTs and OTs, so it would get pretty tight in there. And then there's like a computer lab that students would typically do work in, or if there was space, they would be in the rehab office as well.
Awesome, thank you. And last question, what are some tips you have to some grad student SLPs who got an externship at an acute care hospital?
Go in prepared to feel like you don't know anything, because truly you learn a lot at that rotation. And don't feel down about it. Like, your supervisors know that you go in with limited knowledge, because you don't truly learn as much until you're actually there practicing. Other tips are work on MBS IMP, because that helps you with your modified barium swallows. And yeah, those are my 2 big tips.
Would it be beneficial for them to memorize like a bedside like organization or like any cognitive test or?
Prior to going in, no, I genuinely went in not knowing anything. I knew a bedside was give them different consistencies and see if they cough, but you learn in your rotation there's a lot more that goes into that, and that's okay that you don't learn it until you get there.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your extern experiences with us, Eileen.
No problem. Well, thank y'all for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, and drop a comment if you have any questions or if you like the video. Let me know. I will be checking on those.